I'm doing a few announcements. Good morning, everybody at home. Can you hear and see us? Wave, yes. Okay. Good morning. I wasn't here last week. Did you all hear about Nat and Nancy's new grandbaby? Was that announcement made? Yes, Sloan Hendrick. She's very tiny, but everybody's doing fine. Remember to submit your pledge by October the 16th, which is a week from today. You can either do it online at fpcrichmond.com/give, or I bet you money, haha, that they have pledge cards in the back of the sanctuary. So do that, please. And as announced in this week's First News Weekly, the Congregational Nominating Committee is looking for recommendations for deacons, elders, and there's a new grandmom, and at-large positions for the CNC, for the nominating committee. For at-large positions that will be, for at-large positions on the CNC that will come open in June. But we're also looking for recommendations for elder and deacon, for elders and deacons. The way the announcement read in FNW, it led off with the CNC nominations, and at first I thought it was just for that, but I checked with Pratt and he said, nope, we're recruiting recommendations for officers and at-large CNC positions. So you can do that online. In FNW, there's a link, and when you click on it, it takes you to a form that talks to you about the elder qualifications and the deacon qualifications and a little bit about CNC, and you can make your recommendations on that form online. And if you have trouble with that and you'd rather do it, you can call Lisa Clark, who is Mary Kay's admin and Amy's admin, and she's very helpful to people that are having trouble navigating any sort of online thing, and she can take your recommendations and submit it or walk you through how to get there. As you may have seen, the registration deadline for the October 21st and 22nd FPC Fall Gathering at Roslyn has been extended to this coming Wednesday, October the 12th. The registration deadline has been extended. You can attend any or all of the events. There is a happy hour and dinner and a speaker on Friday evening. And then on Saturday, there are 2 talks. There's coffee, there's a talk in the morning, there's lunch, a talk in the afternoon, and our Carson lecturer, the visiting lecturer, is being sponsored by our Carson Lecture Series, and he is Dr. Ryan Bonfiglio, who is Assistant Professor of Old Testament at Emory University's Candler School of Theology, and as described on the website, on our website, he will lead us in exploring how the ancient idea of the tabernacle, God's way of being in the world long before the temple was built, invites us to think in fresh ways about what it looks like to pursue faith, engage our communities, and join Jesus' work in the world today. My last thing is that you may have seen that Lisa Clark is retiring this fall. I've gone into an emotional decline because she provides a lot of support to the clerk in the session. And so, and they've asked for anybody that wants to send her a note. I think care of Mary Kay, and just thanking her for her service and saying anything that you want to say. So we are pleased to have with us today and also next week too, Bruce Miller, who will talk to us more about the Gospel of John.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm so glad to see so many of you. This is the John 7 Sunday, which is just a pivotal chapter in my life, and I'll tell you why. It is so difficult. And So I'm really glad you're here. Let's start with a prayer if we can. Heavenly Father, thank you for this opportunity, this beautiful day to bring us together, to share our thoughts and our questions. Be with us as we contemplate your word and seek your guidance in our lives. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. On Friday of this week, yesterday, I had one of my favorite opportunities that comes along every now and then. I'm a part of the folks who work at Mason ARC, which is the Arts Research Center at George Mason University. And the work that I've been doing at Virginia Repertory Theater for the last 47 years involves a lot of art, which I love, and it involves a lot of research, which I love absolutely just as much. And the reason that I love the research is because it helps to reassure me that all the work I'm doing on the art side actually makes a difference, that it actually has an impact, that it actually changes lives. And one of the reasons I love and I hate John 7 is because it's the chapter kind of where the rubber hits the road and all this stuff that we've been led to believe, we start to see those things that we start to see in well-written novels and well-directed movies where we're halfway through. And then we go, oh, this isn't as obvious as I thought it was. Something's going on that's different here. Oh my goodness, they're pulling all the rugs out from under me. Well, if you have lived very much of your life, you realize that throughout life, everything pulls rugs out from under you. Life is about rug pulling. And you go through various parts of it. Oh, and I haven't said hi to the Zoom people. Hello, Zoom people. Thank you for being here too. Okay, I was reminded by seeing Brick walk over towards the camera, and I went, okay, I need to say hi. The great thing about rug pulling is that it keeps life interesting and fascinating and making it something of purpose. And otherwise, we would get up in the morning, we would know exactly what's going on, we would do it, and we would be so bored. And life is not boring. It is anything but boring. So today is the day that when we talk about John 7, at the end of the day, you'll either go, I still like him, or you'll go, I hate him, he is evil, he should never walk into this building again. Now, who's going to make that happen? All right. And I remind everyone that I teach from a place of questions. And boy, today, that's really, really true. So when last we left this story, Jesus was being followed by 5,000 men, and we are led to believe, if we read the commentaries, 7,500 women and children who are accompanying the men, but don't really matter when you add up the figure of the 5,000, because we're in a very patriarchal society, okay? So imagine you're on this hill, 5,000 men are sitting there, the women and children are behind them. Everybody's hungry. Jesus says, turns to the disciples, go out and figure out where you can buy food to feed the 5,000, okay? Go. And in the Bible, it says that Jesus tested the disciples by asking them this question. It's like, okay, I've got a stumper for you. We're in the middle of nowhere. There's no Walmart down the street, or Publix, or Kroger, or finish the list. Go figure out where we can buy food for 5,000 people. Okay, great. He tested the disciples. And of course, one of them came back with the accountant answer. If you've had the privilege in your life to work with an accountant on your team, you know that accountants come back and give you the 28 reasons why the way you're thinking about this isn't going to work. All right, because you have to work within accounting principles and you have to do it this way, and it's all very cut and dried, you know? And life is not cut and dried. But the accountant in the group said, well, we can't possibly do that. It would take 2/3 of a man's salary, and we don't make a salary, and we don't have any money, and we can't, and there are no stores. And what are you talking about? And then this kid, this wonderful biblical kid, comes up and goes, I have 2 dried fish and 5 loaves. Could this help? And he didn't just walk up because he was in the front, because the kids aren't allowed in the front. He went way in the back with the 7,500 women and children. And Jesus doesn't turn to the disciple, he turns to the kid. And he says, yeah, maybe that'll work. And then through whatever signs or miracles, we have our words up here that we've been talking about, they not only feed the 5,000 and the 7,500, but they have 12 baskets of leftovers. They ask for the, little pack that you get at restaurants, and 12 baskets full of the take-homes. So John tells us this was a sign. Well, a sign for what? A signpost for what? An indicator of what? Well, it's a sign that Jesus is someone that we should pay attention to. It is a sign that Jesus was exactly who he said he was, the Son of God and the Son of Man. He was half and half. If you remember the old search commercials where the search bumped into each other and go, it's a breath mint. No, it's a candy mint. And you all don't remember. But anyway, some of us remember. And, it's two mints in one. Jesus was two heroes in one. He was the Son of God. He was the Son of Man. And how stressful must that be? He got weary. We hear it all through this. He got everything that we get. He got troubled. He got confused. He got angry. He made bullwhips. And he's the Son of God who does everything right and understands everything. Why is it not self-evident that John and the other disciples and all of the people in the room are confused? I'm not quite following. So Jesus himself goes, I know, I got to be by myself. How many times have any of us encountered just leave me alone, I got to go be by myself for a while, because there are 5,000 of you looking at me and going, what next? Now what do we do? Okay, come on. And you're going, I don't know. I'm a little confused. So Jesus goes off by himself to a mountain. That's where you go in the Bible when you want to be alone. You can't go into your study, you go into a mountain. So Jesus goes to a mountain, and the disciples stay behind, and they go, don't follow him, just let him be. It's Jesus, give him some space. Yeah. So Zoom people, I can speak a little louder, and I will. And room people, don't think I'm yelling at you. I pushed the button. It's definitely on, Zoom people, and I'm sorry. We can hear it here. Anyway, if I speak a little louder, can Zoom people give me a thumbs up? Does that help any? All right, I'm going to speak a little louder. I'm going to be Bruce the theater guy, and all of those projection techniques that I learned in college, I'm going to do them. I was trying to be Bruce the mic guy, but now I'm going to be Bruce the theater guy, all right? So Jesus goes off by himself where he doesn't have to listen to me yelling into the microphone. And the night goes by. And the disciples go, we're just sitting here. We don't know when he's coming back. Let's get in the boat and row to the other side of the lake. It's a big lake. And they go, okay, that makes sense. We're going to leave him here alone with his thoughts on the mountainside. He'll figure it out. So they do. And they're rowing across the lake, and they've gone a couple miles. It's a big lake. Sea of Galilee, and they're out in the middle of it, and a storm comes up, and they start getting a little nervous because they're in this boat and the waves are lapping and the winds are blowing, and they left Jesus back on the mountain, and then all of a sudden they see a light out on the water, and we see it through their eyes. John says, honest to goodness, honest to God, this is what it felt like. We see this light. And so we're trying really hard to get to the other side of the lake because we're starting to get a little scared because it is choppy. And we're paddling for all we're worth. And the sails aren't really working because the wind is tossing and turning, blowing in every different direction. And then they see the light and they go, what's that? And if you look at any of the paintings, beautiful paintings that have been painted of Jesus walking on water, sometimes he's really far away in the painting. Sometimes he's getting closer, closer, closer. You could kind of show the paintings one after the other and see Jesus getting closer. And all of a sudden the disciples go, that's Jesus. Well, what boat's he in? There weren't any other boats there. We left him alone without a boat. He's walking on water. Well, they can't be but so surprised by this point in the story, because Jesus is starting to do more and more miraculous things, more duname, if we were in the other books in the New Testament, or in John, more and more semeun, signs, more signs so that you know, this is who I am, this is why you should pay attention, this is why it's important. John is the logic guy, he's the logos guy. He's a Legos guy who builds it bit by bit by bit. And here we have the bit where Jesus walks on water. Now, if you read this passage in Matthew, Peter, I think, says, well, Jesus, call to me. I'll walk on water too. And Jesus says, okay, if you really got the faith, come out to me. And so Peter says, yes. And so he steps out of the boat and he starts to walk towards Jesus, and down he goes. Just one hand held up out of the water. Peter doesn't swim. He's a fisherman, but people don't swim in those days. So Jesus grabs his hand in Matthew and brings him up. In John, that part doesn't happen. John was in the boat. He's telling the same story, but he doesn't tell that part. Now, as I said on my first Sunday, there are some people that say this is as close as we get to an eyewitness account. They're not saying that John himself wrote the book that we know as the Gospel of John, because even they say it was probably written 20 years after John's death, but it's people who studied with him. It's the Johannine community that studied with him in Ephesus. They're the ones who actually ultimately wrote it down. And he never told the part about Peter sinking like a stone. But he did tell about Jesus walking across the water, getting in the boat, and immediately the storm kind of ends and pew, they're on the other side of the lake. They got there so fast. In an instant, Jesus got in the boat, and an instant later, they're on the other side of the lake. It was like in A Wrinkle in Time, when they take time and they fold it. And, how many of you know A Wrinkle in Time? Oh, God bless you all. One of my favorite books. Hannah's dog is named Charles Wallace, who's the little kid in A Wrinkle in Time. Anyway, so Jesus gets in the boat after walking on water. In this version, none of the disciples presume to join him. And they make it to the other side of the lake, but all is not well. We get to 660, the end of chapter 6, and the headline says, "Many disciples desert Jesus." It's not going great. On hearing it, many of his disciples said, "This is a hard teaching. Who can accept it?" Aware that his disciples were grumbling about this, Jesus said to them, "Does this offend you? What if you see the Son of Man ascend to where he was before? Heaven, ascend to where he was before. The Spirit gives life. The flesh counts for nothing. The words I have spoken to you are spirit, and they are life. Yet there are some of you who do not believe." And the other definition for that word in the Koine Greek is trust. There are some of you who do not trust. For Jesus had known from the beginning which of them did not believe and who would betray him. He went on to say, "This is why I told you that no one can come to me unless the Father has enabled him." No one can come to me, can trust me, can believe in me unless the Father has flipped the switch inside of you and made it possible for you. I'm now realizing every time I look over there, I'm not helping you read my lips, and that makes me sad. So, are you? Okay, great. I'm going to try and do this. Okay. So then we go to Jesus goes to the Feast of the Tabernacles. Now, you were talking about the Carson lecture series that is talking about tabernacles. Am I right? And the Feast of the Tabernacles is this fascinating thing that all the Jewish men are required to go to. And they build tabernacles, which I think of as Morin Tabernacle Choir, huge buildings like they replicate at the 1964 World's Fair. And that's not it at all. The Feast of the Tabernacles is a celebration of the tiny little huts that God's people built when they were in the wilderness for 40 years. Those are the tabernacles, and they sleep in them, and they eat in them. They don't eat them, give them indigestion, but they sleep in them, and they eat in them, and they worship in them. And kind of the point is, don't ever lose sight of your tabernacle, because for 40 years, that's all we had. We were wandering in the wilderness, and we didn't have these beautiful surroundings. We weren't blessed with greatness to remind us of greatness. We lived in huts. We lived in tabernacles. And they weren't huge, but they were precious because they kept us safe, and they kept us together, and they connected us to God. So you go to the Feast of the Tabernacles in Jesus' day, and there are little huts everywhere. Everybody comes and they build their little hut out of organic materials, found materials. Today they allow aluminum. And They celebrate the fact that for 40 years they were in the wilderness, and that was their temple and their communication place with God. So Jesus goes there. Well, let me back up a little. The very beginning of chapter 7. After this, Jesus went around in Galilee, purposely staying away from Judea, because the Jews there were waiting to kill him. But when the Jewish Feast of Tabernacles was near, Jesus' brothers said to him, "You ought to leave here and go to Judea, so that your disciples may see the miracles that you do, the signs that you do. No one wants to become a public figure. No one who wants to become a public figure acts in secret. So stop going off by yourself, stop hiding, go do some magic tricks in front of the crowd, and then everybody will believe in you. Since you're doing these things, show yourself to the world." For even his own brothers did not believe in him. Now you look up the word, brothers, and you go, who's he talking about? And it's tortured, the commentary that is out there. These are his stepbrothers, the natural children born of Mary and Joseph. No, this word means his disciples. No, this word means everyone who is following him. I don't know. We don't know what it means, but the people closest to him, the people who see him every day, the people who ought to understand and believe, are still scratching their heads. Why not? Half God, half man, kind of crazy. Of course they're scratching their heads. Of course today we are going, huh? Therefore, Jesus told them that old phrase that he falls back on. The right time for me has not yet come. For you, any time is right. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testify that what it does is evil. You go to the feast. I am not yet going up to the feast because for me, the right time has not yet come. Same thing he said to Mary, his mother, at the wedding in Cana. It's not my time. And she said, oh yeah, well, guess what? I'm throwing you in the deep end. And she turns to the waiters and said, whatever he tells you, do that. But Jesus doesn't stay away for long. He stays away for the first couple days, and then on day 4 of the 5-day feast, he shows up at the temple. He feels compelled to go and preach and tell his story. And he kind of goes in secret, but suddenly that guy, that Jesus guy that everybody's talking about, is suddenly here. And the people who love him go, great, let's go. And the people who hate him and want to put him to death go, great, let's catch him. So they're converging on that place in Jerusalem where Jesus is going to preach. And so Jesus says, my teaching is not my own. It comes from him who sent me. If anyone chooses to do God's will, he will find out whether my teaching comes from God or whether I speak on my own. This is an experiential thing. This isn't just hearing and believing. This isn't that bumper sticker. Jesus said it, I believe it, that's the end of it. Nothing like that. He who speaks on his own does so to gain honor for himself, but he who works for the honor of the one who sent him is a man of truth. There's nothing false about him. Has not Moses given you the law? Yet not one of you keeps the law. Why are you trying to kill me? That's what it says. I didn't cut anything. He's trying to explain, yes, it's hard to understand, but if you really try, and if you take it bit by bit and build one piece upon the other, maybe you will eventually get it. Why are you trying to kill me? And they answer, because you were demon possessed. The crowd answered, who's trying to kill you? This gets weird. Jesus said to them, I did one miracle, and you were all astonished. Yet because Moses gave you circumcision, though actually it did not come from Moses, but from the patriarchs, you circumcise a child on the Sabbath. And if that's not weird, what is? Now, if a child can be circumcised on the Sabbath so that the law of Moses may not be broken, why are you angry with me for healing the whole man on the Sabbath? He jumps back. He goes back to, remember that guy that I healed when the waters were troubled at the pool at Bethesda? And you all haunted him and haunted me and say, exactly what day did he do this? He did it on the Sabbath. Whoa, no can do. He is demon possessed. We gotta kill him. And Jesus goes, I don't get it. I'm trying to pass on the word that has been given to me, which is basically nothing new. It's love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, and your might. And now I'm going to add something else to it. And love your neighbor, or love your neighbor. Love your neighbor just as much as you love yourself. That's it. That's it in a nutshell. And I say it, and you say, do a miracle. Walk on water. We heard you did it. Here, somebody get a pool. And Jesus is getting frustrated. At that same point, some of the people of Jerusalem begin to ask, isn't this the man they are trying to kill? Here he is, speaking publicly, and they are not saying a word to him. Have the authorities really concluded that he is the Christ, the Messiah? But we know where this man is from. When the Christ comes, no one will know where the Christ is from. But this guy, we know this guy. We know Joseph. He fixed our kitchen table. Jesus helped. We've known him since he was a kid. He lives in Capernaum. Nobody worth anything comes from Capernaum. I mean, it says those exact words about Nazareth, elsewhere. Oh, goodness. Then Jesus, still teaching in the temple courts, cried out, yes, you know me, and you know where I am from. I am not here on my own, but he who sent me is true. You do not know him, but I know him because I am from him, and he sent me. Well, it goes on. And what we find out is they say, well, if only Jesus were from Bethlehem, then we would know. And if you read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Jesus is from Bethlehem. Well, no, one of them doesn't say, but two of them say he's from Bethlehem. Because in Micah, they prophesied he's going to be from the family of David, he's going to be from Bethlehem. But in John, and this is the part that when my parents were saying, you need to be a minister. I don't know, I'm not going to be a minister. Why aren't you going to be a minister? Because I don't understand it all. I don't get it. Ministers have to understand. Ministers have to know. Ministers have to say with certainty, yes, this is exactly what happened. And I'm reading stuff like this and I go, wait a minute, what does this just say? In John, it says, he's not from Bethlehem. And you can imagine everybody going, wait, who? I read Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and they make it very clear that Jesus was born in Bethlehem. Now, in one instance, he's from there, and in another place, he was just visiting there, but he's from Bethlehem, and that means that the prophecy is real. And John says, what can I tell you? The mythology about me, John says, is that I was taken into a Roman Colosseum and boiled in oil. That's what still a lot of people believe. You look up John and they go, John was the one who was taken into a Roman Colosseum and boiled in oil. John probably heard that. And he went, if I had been boiled in oil, I would remember. And he comes out fresh as a daisy, in the mythology surrounding John. And John grapples in chapter 7 with the mythology and the truth. And Jesus grapples in chapter 7 with the mythology and the truth. And he doesn't say the mythology is wrong. The mythology is leading you in the wrong direction. He gives full credit to the value of mythology. Mythology helps us all get on the same page. Mythology makes it easier for us to understand. You want the proof to be in the pudding? Jesus was born in Bethlehem, okay? Angels came, stars came, shepherds in the field, all of this stuff. It happened. And John is saying, yeah, Jesus never said that. I'm not going to put it in my book because I think he's from Capernaum. And his mother Mary has been living with me in Ephesus for the last 40 years. I think I would know if all of this stuff had happened. Now, the reason I say when I teach on John 7 is that some of you are going to say, damn his hide, he should never be in here again, is because for whatever reason, I am completely comfortable with the notion that the mythology is true. And the everyday historical fact that you and I live with is true. And the challenge when people start to pull the rugs out is to put the two together and go, one looks at the truth this way, one looks at the truth this way. Can we be comfortable with that? My wife is a Buddhist, and she has taken me on 2 occasions to see the Dalai Lama. And if you've never seen the Dalai Lama, go see the Dalai Lama. There are opportunities. He'll come to DC or Charlottesville in one case, and you have the chance to do it. And it's an overwhelming experience. I'm not a Buddhist per se, but I'm crazy about Buddhists. I think it's great. And there's not one truth, and there are sheep in many flocks. And the Dalai Lama says, now I know a lot of you aren't Buddhists, and that's okay. To be a Buddhist, you don't have to be a Buddhist and only a Buddhist because Buddhism is the only way to get where we're all trying to go. Buddhism is one path, Christianity is one path. You can be a Christian and still be a Buddhist. The Dalai Lama says we all need to do this. And when I read John 7, and I have 5 more minutes, it says we all need to do this. And people say, be more concrete, explain it to us, and do another miracle right now. And Jesus goes, you're just not getting it. You want to get it? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind. Love your neighbors just as much as you love yourself. But explain the technicalities to it. I can't do it. As he says later on in John, and we'll get to that next week on the last week. If I could explain it to you, I would. But we're not ready to hear it. As he says in this chapter, those of you who believe in me, believe in you because God flipped a switch. Quoting The Color Purple, which I quote all the time, and have quoted it like 3 times probably already since I've been here the last 4 weeks. God is inside you and everyone else. In chapter 6 of John, it said, what's the word? Meno, which means remain or abide. God remains with us. God abides with us. And if we let God flip the switch, then we're not going to sweat the details. We're not going to let our twisted, pseudoscientific brains say, you got to look at it this way. You've got to look at it through this lens. You've got to take this mythology and balance it with this mythology, but where is the mystery? And Jesus is saying in chapter 7, embrace the mystery. And there are two stories at the end of chapter 7. The man who was blind from birth is one of them. And there's a man who's been blind from birth, from the day he was born, who sits outside the temple and begs. And Jesus comes up and says, let's fix this. And he takes dirt in his hands and he spits in it. And he makes mud and he puts it on the guy's eyes. And he says, now go wash that off and you'll be able to see. So the guy goes and he washes it off. And he's had LASIK surgery. He can see again. We have miracles that happen every day that we overlook. And they come through science. And we go, that's not a miracle, that was science. You go, no, science is a miracle. Science is part of the miracle.
Mm-mm.
And what happens to the man blind from birth? The Pharisees go and they say, wait a minute, this happened on the Sabbath. And I think you even washed that mud off on the Sabbath. Can't do any of that. You're getting it, the Pharisees, you Pharisees, you're getting it all wrong. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your might. Love your neighbor just as much as you love yourself. That's what's inside the thing that the Jews have on their door. What's it called? The mezuzah. You know, my friends Neil and Sarah Bell November had the mezuzah. And they would, you know, I can't remember what order it comes in, but they would do it every day, coming and going. And Neil, I said, what's with that? And he said, it's so that you stay in touch with that the number one rule, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your might. Now in Jewish culture, it stops there. Christian, and I can't remember what it's called, Sema or something, is and love your neighbor just as much as you love yourself. Jesus saw the man blind from birth, loved him, said, I've got to fix this problem. And he went about fixing it. And people said, all right, we have to kill you now because you did that on the Sabbath. The other story comes at the end of John 7, when everybody's saying, you're crazy, you're demon possessed. You're not making any sense. And the other story is the woman accused of adultery. What could be more clear? She was caught in the act. She was doing it with a guy that wasn't her husband. So they drag her to the middle of the town, just like any good Moses-fearing person would do. And they said, okay, everybody bring your stones or find them where you can. We're going to put her to death. And then they say, and this gives us a chance to test Jesus. Maybe we'll get him to say, he likes people. Maybe we'll get him to say, no, you shouldn't do that. And then we can kill him. So they say, go get Jesus. So they get Jesus and he comes and they go, all right, the law clearly says she's been convicted of adultery. We have to put her to death. And they're reaching down and they're picking up their rocks. And Jesus says, well, he's quiet for a while. He doesn't say anything. He writes words in the sand. I'd love to have the overhead camera where we could see, what did he write? but we don't. And he writes words in the sand, and then he says, all right, whoever among you is without sin, let him cast the first stone. And one by one, the others go, I think that disqualifies me. I'm putting down my rock. And then the next one does, and they walk away until it's just the woman accused of adultery and Jesus. It's just us. Yes. Any sin, says I. I don't know. Don't listen to me. That's why I seldom stop and say any questions, is because I like, why would anyone ask me a question? I don't know. But I read this and I find it fascinating. And at the end of this chapter, where everybody's pulling Jesus here and here and here, and John is saying, I don't think he was really born in Bethlehem. I think he's kind of a bumpkin from Capernaum. And that's still okay? John says, whoever is without any sin, let him be the one to cast the first stone. And they all, just as we all of us human beings would go, I better put down the rock. He's got me there. And so at the end of chapter 7, where John is pulling a rug here and pulling a rug here and pulling a rug here, the blind man says, yeah, maybe I did this on the Sabbath, but I can see. His parents are brought in. Yeah, he's been blind from birth, but now he can see. Is that not the salient point? And the woman who's been committed of adultery is no different from any of us and does not deserve to be put to death, which they actually otherwise would have done. So John 7 ends on a high note where the truth of Jesus' teaching, all the stuff that he goes, I'd explain it to you, but I can't because we're not ready to hear it. But still, it all comes together with the blind man and with the woman accused of adultery. And that's why I love John 7, and I am troubled by it because all the rugs are getting pulled. It's not an easy chapter, but it's the truth. Whoever listens to me is hearing the truth. Nobody's saying, check your mind at the door, let's come in and let's believe in all the miracles. Saying, nope, they're not miracles, they're signs. It's a book of signs, and it's pointing us to the truth. Love the Lord your God with all your soul, your heart, your might. Love your neighbor just as much as you love yourself. Love the woman who committed adultery just as much as you love yourself, because she is you and you are her. And that's all. I'm way past time. Thank you. Next week, we will wrap it all up in a nice little red bow. Can't wait. I will see you all then. Thank you.